Good morning, Internet. It is March 27th, 2019, and I have a good show planned for you today. Thank you so much for being here. Just by being here, you are committing to making yourself a better person and to making yourself a better parent, which will, in the end, make the world a better place. So, the title of my stream is a little provocative, but I'm going to show you a string of evidence which suggests that Christians do a very poor job of having an in-group preference, staying together, and fighting for their rights and their morality. And because of that, public schools have become a beacon of the deterioration of Christian morality in the Western world. And there is a plethora of overwhelming evidence which supports this conclusion. This is actually something that I saw Mike Cernovich tweeting about a month ago. And he was clearly just doing it to be provocative, and people don't realize that people on social media do things to be provocative because you want to get a rise out of people. But what I found very interesting is the angry reaction at Cernovich and the lack of self-reflection within the Christian community. And I myself, a devout follower of Jesus Christ, find it very important to self-reflect and talk about not only what Christians are doing right, but what Christians are doing wrong, especially in the context of what is happening in our public schools, because I doubt, or I don't think any of us can deny that the modern American education system is not a friendly place for a young Christian child. So we're going to get into that. All right. So I have a couple of articles here that I think you'll find very interesting. All right, so let's start with what has recently happened. Actually, I'd like to backtrack a little bit. So last week, I told the story about a mother. She sent her son to school. He's a middle school student, and he came home and said, "Mom, something terrible happened. A school administrator overheard me saying that I wouldn't date a Muslim girl." And this child was called into the principal's office. The principal sat the child down and said, "Saying you wouldn't date a Muslim girl is very hateful, very intolerant, and you have to apologize." And the student said no. And the principal told the student, "Go home, tell your mom what happened, and if you don't come to school and apologize for your intolerance by tomorrow, you're going to be suspended." And of course, this is outrageous, particularly because this would never have happened if for example, if a Muslim student was overheard saying they wouldn't date a Christian. Do you think the principal would have called that student down and told them they had to apologize? Well, of course they wouldn't have. And oh, by the way, a Muslim student would have been within their right to discriminate in their dating practices. In fact, what is more important in a child's dating practices or an adult's dating practices than making sure you date someone with similar values? That is how you should be picking a mate. You should be looking to date someone who has a similar worldview and similar values to yourself. Because if you're not, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you are, especially in many families, you are insulting the values that your family's raised you on. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with Christians discriminating in their dating practices and only dating Christians. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Muslims discriminating in their dating practices and only dating Muslims. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Jewish people discriminating in their dating practices and only dating Jewish people. And if you look at the in-group preferences of Christians, of Muslims, and of Jewish people, Christians have by far the weakest in-group preference, because for a large majority of Muslims, if their child comes home and says that they're going to marry a Christian, their family will disown them. The Jewish parents will not allow their child to marry a Christian unless that Christian first converts to Judaism. So Christians have the weakest in-group preference. And I'm going to demonstrate to you here why that makes public school and really the West in general, a dangerous place for Christians. And keep in mind the tweet I brought up by Mike Cernovich, in which he tweeted out that Christians are the reason that the West is falling. And of course, this led to a lot of outrage. Well, let's look at the evidence and let's see if Mike Cernovich was actually onto something. Is public school a safe place for your Christian child and your morality? Yeah, that's me looking at me. Okay, that's better. Okay. Move this along. Move my screen around a little bit. Okay. All right. England greatly expands sex education despite some parents' protest. So, about a month ago in England, the government announced that they were greatly expanding their LGBTQ ABCDEFGHIJK LMNOP QRSTUV, you get it, sex education program, where they'd be teaching little kids all about the trans issues and all about LGBTQ and all that. And of course, there was some backlash. London. English schools will significantly broaden sex and relationship education to cover topics including same-sex relationships, transgender people, menstruation, and of course, when they say menstruation, they'll be teaching that young boys also have their periods. Sexual assault, which I'm sure they'll be teaching that a boy even asking a girl out on a date and the girl saying no, that's sexual assault. Mental health, genital cutting, that's interesting, forced marriage, pornography, and sexting, the government has announced. The changes, the first revision of the sex education curriculum since 2000, have met with vocal opposition from some parents and religious schools that want the ability to opt out of elements they object to, but formally became government policy when they were published on Monday and will go into effect in 2020. There is no set of guidance that you can come up with for relationship and sex education that everybody is going to be absolutely happy with, Damien Hinds, British Educational Secretary, said in Parliament on Monday. Our guiding principles have been that these compulsory subjects, notice that it's compulsory, should help to keep children safe, should help to prepare them for the world in which they are growing up, and also help them foster respect for others and for differences. Now, how do you think that the Christian community responds to helping our children better cope with the world and foster respect for differences? And how do you think the Muslim community is going to react? Parents would have the ability to exclude their children from some elements, including the most explicitly sexual, but not others, and not after age 14. A member of the... From age 15, it will be up to the students to decide whether they want to fully participate. The current blah, 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 blah. An online petition asking for parents to be given broader power to opt out had gathered more than 100,000 signatures by Monday morning, prompting Parliament to debate the matter. The government was pretty much indoctrinating the children with a specific ideology that there is no such thing as right or wrong. It is just whatever you like, basically, said Muska Muhammad. These are our children. They belong to the parents. They don't belong to the state. Britta Ribby Smith, a mother of 3, said she was there to support the Christian cause. Under the new curriculum, as the Christian children get older, the LGBT kind of agendas become stronger, she said. Now, who do you think is going to get their way? Do you think Britta Ribby Smith is going to get her way? Or do you think Musa Muhammad is going to get his way? This was in February. This was in March. Birmingham school stops LGBT lessons after parent protest. A primary school that taught pupils about homosexuality as part of a program to challenge homophobia has stopped the lessons after hundreds of children were withdrawn by parents in protest. Parkfield Community Schools in Birmingham has been the scene of weekly protests over the lessons, which parents claim are promoting gay and transgender lifestyles. In a letter to parents, the school said, "Up to the end of this term, we will not be delivering any no outsider lessons in our long blah blah blah. On Friday, about 600 Muslim children ages between 4 and 11 were withdrawn from school." The Muslims withdrew their children from school, and sure enough, the curriculum changed. So you have this situation in the UK, right? And this is true all over the Western world. In fact, in the United States of America right now, and there's no public conversation happening about it, in many schools, transgenders are actually being brought into the school. These are the outside lessons that the Muslims are outraged about. And they are teaching the kids. And of course, they're showing up dressed in a very sexually provocative way with glitter all over their bodies. And they're telling young children that, they're telling young boys that you are not a boy. They're telling young girls that you are not a girl. And right now in the West, the Christian response is so minuscule that you don't even hear about it in public TV. In fact, just a few weeks ago, what's the child's name? I'm sure you know in the comments. There's a young transgender boy who is being paraded around the mainstream media. He was on Michael Strahan's show, in which he's being glorified. And this young boy has been seen dancing on stage with money being thrown at him. He's being made into a sexual object. Clearly, this boy is being abused. But in the Christian world, they're not doing anything about it. But look at the contrast to the response in the Muslim world. Because in the Muslim world, or in England, and it's great, it's very ironic, isn't it, that in England, that the Christians were told to F off. But the Muslims said absolutely not, pulled their children out of school, and now the schools are changing their tune. Because the Muslims have a strong in-group preference. Where is that in-group preference in the Christian world? If you don't believe me yet, wait till you see where this is going. It gets better, people. All right, let me just see. Just want to take care of this. Bear with me for a second, people. That's better. Okay. Okay, here we go. Police appeared to punish victims of Newcastle grooming gangs. So we all know the situation in the United Kingdom, the Tommy Robinson situation, which Tommy Robinson, it was brought to his attention that there were these grooming gangs in the United Kingdom, and they had been there for decades. And thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, some estimate up to 1 million British children, Christian children, were sexually assaulted and raped. They were groomed and raped by these overwhelmingly Muslim grooming gangs, 90% Muslim. Tommy Robinson, of course, tried to bring attention to this situation, and the result of that was he has been politically persecuted in the UK for years now. He's been thrown in jails multiple times, not just the last time, which was very public. He's been thrown in jail multiple times for trying to draw attention to this issue. And if you follow it closely, there are actually Christian fathers that have been arrested for hate speech for going to the police and saying, my daughter has been groomed and is being raped. And he's been arrested for hate speech. So Christians haven't been able to protect their children from being raped by grooming gangs in the United Kingdom. Well, last week, or no, a week or two ago. You get it. You get it. There was the New Zealand shooting, which of course is very tragic. Now, I will preface this. I didn't follow it closely because I just can't deal with the mainstream media shit anymore. But I always caution people to be skeptical of any mainstream narrative. Now, I'm not saying this was a false flag. I haven't looked into it deeply enough to know that. I have no knowledge of why it would be a false flag. I just turned it off. But whenever these things happen, from my experience in the past, where I did look into things very deeply, you always want to question government narratives, because the government does commit false flags. If you think I'm wrong, I don't know, Russia collusion. You don't think that whole narrative was a false flag? Weapons of mass destruction to start the war in Iraq. A little bit of a false flag. Saudi Arabia having their role in 9/11 covered up, and Iraq and Afghanistan essentially being blamed for it, which Iraq had nothing to do with it. I mean, they weren't blamed for it, but the media basically made the public believe that Iraq had something to do with it when they didn't. And they used that to justify the Iraq War. Babies being thrown out of incubators during the Gulf War. This is why you have to get back to primary documents, people. This is why you have to take your children out of public school, because people don't know how to think. If you get back to primary documents, you can get back to the documents that show the government lying. For example, through a FOIA request, and eventually when the government released the 28 pages, which explained that Saudi Arabia played the largest role in the 9/11 attacks, well, if you were able to get back to primary documents, you would say, wait, so even if the government officials themselves had nothing to do with the attacks, which, again, we could get into that, we know for a fact now from government documents that the government covered up what actually happened in 9/11 and used it to launch a war to go into a country that didn't have nearly as much to do with it. So if you say false flags don't happen, it's because you've been bumped on the head. But you don't know how to get back to documents. But anyway, so there's the New Zealand shooting, and what was the response in the West? Right? We have woman. Why is this in my way? It's annoying me. All right, whatever. There you go. Women in New Zealand are donning headscarves to remember the mosque shooting victims. And all over New Zealand, Christian women are showing their tolerance and wearing headscarves. And listen, I'm all fine with that. I mean, I feel terrible for what happened to the people at that mosque. I mean, no one should be killed. But Christians are showing their tolerance for what is happening in the Muslim world, right? Here is, this is from the Independent, the UK Independent. New Zealand TV presenters wear hijabs and speak in Arabic in solidarity with Muslim shooting victims. So the TV anchors themselves were wearing headscarves after the New Zealand shooting. And again, I have no problem with having sympathy for Muslims that die. We should have sympathy for Muslims that die. That's Christian. The problem is Christians don't demand the same for themselves in the Western world, and because of that, Christian values are the ones that are being pushed to the side, right? When you see the LGBTQ, QRSTUV happening, being mandated across the school systems, why is that happening? It's because the feminists have a stronger in-group preference than the Christians, right? This is from Breitbart. Media silence surrounds Muslim massacre of Christians. This was released the same week of the New Zealand shooting. Get ready for this. Political leaders and public figures were falling over themselves this weekend to condemn the mosque attacks in New Zealand, while dozens of Christians were slaughtered by Muslims in Nigeria to the sound of crickets. The mosque attacks were indeed a horrific affair and worthy of universal condemnation. Presidents, prime ministers, royalty, and religious leaders rushed to extend their condolences to victims and their families, as well they should. Without exception, the mainstream media gave top billing to the shootings, with newspapers carrying the story on the front pages and televisions. Yeah, we know that. The bizarre aspect of the coverage was not, in fact, the attention paid to the heinous crimes committed in New Zealand, but the absolute silence surrounding the simultaneous massacres of scores of Christians by Muslim militants in Africa. As Breitbart News alone reported, among major news outlets, jihadis racked up a death toll of over 120 Christians over the past 3 weeks in central Nigeria. Did you hear about this? Employing machetes and gunfire to slaughter men, women, and children, burning down over 140 houses, destroying property, and spreading terror. Now, in one incident, you had a deranged man, a lone shooter, carrying out a horrific incident, no doubt about it, going into a mosque and killing the Muslims. It's terrible. In the other incident, you have an organized attack on Christians in which hundreds of Christians are killed and 120 houses were burned down. What would the Western media's response have been if over 100 Muslims were killed and 120 of their houses were burned down? Yeah, I think that probably would have been a big deal. You think they would have been wearing hijabs on television? The New York Times did not place this story on the front page. In fact, they did not cover the story at all. Hundreds of Christians were killed the same week of the New Zealand shooting. 120 Christian houses were burned down the same week of the Christian shooting, and the New York Times did not cover the story. Apparently, when assessing all the news that fits to the print, the massacre of African Christians did not measure up. The same could be said about the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and the Detroit Free Press. Other major papers in the United States. The news shown from the 3 major television channels did not mention the story, and nor did CNN or MSNBC. There are several possible explanations for this remarkable silence, and none of them is good. So you guys get it, right? The same week of the New Zealand shooting in which, and rightfully so, news anchors and people, Christians around the world, are showing their outrage, wearing hijabs for what happened. Hundreds of Christians were slaughtered. 120 Christian houses were burned down, and not one word about it from the newspapers. So you say, okay, well, maybe the newspapers somehow just overlooked this tragedy. All right. Let's talk about what has happened over the course of the last year. Prosecution at a glance. Christians remain one of the most persecuted religious groups in the world. While Christian persecution takes many forms, it is defined as any hostility experienced as a result of identification with Christ. Christian torture remains an issue for believers throughout the world, including the risk of imprisonment, loss of home, well, we saw that this week, and assets, physical torture, and death. Trends show that countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East are intensifying persecution of Christians, and perhaps the most vulnerable are Christian women, who often face double persecution for faith and gender. That includes rape. Every month, 255 Christians are killed, 104 are abducted, 180 Christian women are raped, sexually harassed, or forced into marriage. 66 churches are attacked. 66 churches are attacked every month. 160 Christians are detained without trial and imprisoned. According to our research, 215 million Christians experience high levels of persecution in the countries on the World Watch List. 1/12 Christians worldwide. Okay, we'll get back down to the numbers. I want to get down to the numbers. I passed the numbers. Okay, here we are. During the World Watch List 2018 reporting period, 3,066 Christians were killed, 1,252 were abducted, and 1,020 were raped or sexually harassed, and 793 churches were attacked. 793 churches. So as you can see, Christian persecution is rampant throughout the world. And not just throughout the world. Look at what happened with the grooming gangs in the United Kingdom. Tens of thousands of young Christian girls raped, and anyone who draws attention to it is themselves silenced by the government and put in prison. So when you put that in context with what's happening in schools, this is why you have the schooling system eroding the morality of Christianity. And of course, this is where our children go and get their morality. This is where children go and their thought processes are shaped. So why would you as a Christian send your child to school? Now, I gave you the story at the beginning of this. I said a young Christian boy stated his dating preference that he wouldn't date a Muslim girl. He was called to the principal's office and threatened with suspension. And I did 2 podcasts on this last week in which we discussed the appropriate way for a mother to respond. But the reason that happened is Christians don't have strong in-group preferences. So because of that, schools are hostile to people who are Christian in faith. Because if a young Muslim boy had stated he wouldn't want to date a Christian, and that's well within his right, that's fine, that's his morality, then nothing would have happened. And the same with a young Jewish child. In fact, Jewish people do a good job with in-group preference because the overwhelming majority of Jewish people send their children to private schools. That's not the same for Christians. And Muslims, they just, as you saw in the UK, if you try to teach their children LGBTQ and transgender, well, they'll just pull all of their children out of school and they'll demand that it stops. And it will stop because they have strong in-group preference. But Christians throughout the world are abused by Hollywood, abused by the media, abused by the schooling system because they don't have strong in-group preference, because Christians have been told, you're intolerant and you have to be tolerant. Well, actually what's happening is the erosion of moral values. And the reason you see the LGBTQ taught in school is because Christians have been convinced they're hateful, and groups like feminist groups, groups like LGBTQ, TQ they have stronger in-group preferences, right? So they go to the school and they demand that the school teaches these things, and they demand that the government mandates this curriculum. But Christians don't do the same. They don't go and demand. If every Christian in the United States of America said, we will pull our children out of school unless you stop teaching this, it would be done tomorrow. The schools would be Christian like they used to be again tomorrow. But where's the in-group preference? Where are Christians uniting together and fighting for their values? Christians have been neutered in the West. Our belief in God has been neutered in the West. People pretend to believe in God, but people don't fight for their beliefs. Christianity has been neutered in the West. So either people like me are going to point it out and we're going to do something about it, and in the meantime, you better pull your children, if you're a Christian, out of the schooling system, because they are going to erode your child's morality. And they are going to indoctrinate your child into feminism, LGBTQ, and they're going to tell your child that you are a very hateful person for your belief in God and your morality. Please follow my other channels. I am on Classical Learner at YouTube. Eventually, that will be my primary location for podcasting about all that is education. Also follow Classical Learner on Facebook. I am posting the links here if my computer cooperates with me. And if you want to support what I'm doing, you can do so at www.patreon.com/FFRnews. I am currently writing a book on the topic of homeschooling and the education system. And I am, let me just get this in here. And I am eventually going to make a documentary on the topic. I would like to state again, for all people who lack nuance, I have no problem with Muslims and their in-group preference. I have no problems with Jews and their in-group preference. What I am saying is that Christians lack in-group preference, and because of that, the public education system is a dangerous place to send your child. If you have any questions, now would be the time to ask them. Brian said, where did this incident happen? It seems that Muslims are the only group respected enough when it comes to objectionable material. Yeah, Brian, that's right. Muslims are respected when they object to certain curriculums because they have strong in-group preference. The Muslims, thousands and thousands of them, pulled their children out of school in the UK. So the government said, oh crap, we can't indoctrinate people if they're not in school. And because of that, they said, okay, we'll stop teaching this material. But Christians don't have that in-group preference. So because of that, groups with stronger in-group preference dominate the curriculum at school. Who are those groups? Those groups are the feminists. Those groups are the LGBTQ groups which dominate the curriculum. And because of that, you have transgenders being brought into the schools to teach elementary school children that boys are not boys and girls are not girls. Now, if Christians did the same thing as Muslims, rather than just signing a petition, if they just, every Christian in America pulled their child out of school tomorrow, well, God will be brought back into school. You better believe it, because the government needs the schools to indoctrinate the children. So if they don't have the children at all, well, they'll give some. But you have to be willing to use leverage, and unfortunately, Christians aren't willing to do that. For example, the young Christian child who had said that he wouldn't date a Muslim, which is perfectly fine. We all date. We all discriminate in dating, right? If a young girl is asked out on a date and she says no, she discriminated for some reason or another to not go on that date. We're not going to tell her that she has to date a young boy because he asked her out. That would be straight out of Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, which was a book designed to show you how the government is going to control the mind of man. Well, it's controlling the mind of Christians, right? Christians can't have an in-group preference. If you're a Christian and you said, I wouldn't date a Muslim, you get called into the principal's office and threatened with suspension. So what I said is that the mother, what I would have done with my child is I would have had a talk with my child to let them know that what they did is perfectly reasonable. And I would have sent my child back to school the next day. I would have had them make their case verbally to the principal as to why a child has every right to decide based on values, right? Islam is a set of values. Christianity is a set of values. I'm not putting value. I'm not even saying which value set is better. I mean, I'm a Christian, so obviously I have my opinion, but right, a Muslim is just as every right to their opinion on that. What I'm saying is I would have my child defend his values, and I would tell him, listen, if you get suspended, you come home, we'll go on a little vacation. We'll have the best time. Don't worry about it. And then after my child got suspended, because undoubtedly the principal wouldn't back down yet, I would have my child take the lead, and I would have them research how to file. Hey, Stacy, thanks for tuning in. I would have my child, yes, my middle school age child, do research on how to file a civil lawsuit for discrimination against their religious beliefs against the school. And I guarantee you, after my child filed the lawsuit, I guarantee you they would apologize and invite my child back to school. Because if they didn't, that's great, because my child's college would be paid for. But more importantly, what would happen? My child would learn the power that they have. They would learn how to fight back against institutions, right? They would learn the legal authority that they have. You have your child file a lawsuit and learn how to do it, and now your child knows in the future, okay, if a big institution attempts to discriminate against me, if a big institution attempts to bully me, I could file a lawsuit and the big institution will back down. This is the strength we have to instill in our children, but this is what we don't do as parents. Most parents, their response is, well, I'm going to go into the school, I'm going to yell at the school, and then the school is still going to suspend my child. You didn't accomplish anything. Your child is still suspended, and more importantly, you didn't make your child strong, you didn't make your child independent. My child would file that lawsuit himself, I guarantee you. And then in the future, he would know that he has the strength and the confidence to fight back against institutions. And if Christians were educated like this, Christians would do much better in the public sphere. It's the same concept when I tell people they should introduce their children to violence. When my son is 2 years old, I'll be enrolling him in MMA class. When my child's 4 years old, I'll be enrolling him in karate class. When my child's in first or second grade age, I'll be enrolling him in PAL wrestling. As soon as he can, I'll be enrolling my child in competitive sports, baseball, lacrosse, soccer, because he has to understand the power within his body. How hard he can hit someone and how hard he should hit someone or shouldn't hit someone. And when you teach your child to be comfortable with their physicality, when you teach your child to understand their ability to strike and defend themselves, the beautiful thing is they never have to, because bullies don't want to mess with someone that has the confidence and the know-how to defend themselves. Well, the same concept is applied to when you're defending your child against authority. If you step in, and this is what my mother always did for me, and this, I love her and I appreciate it, but she shouldn't have. When you step in and you defend your child against authority, you are not giving them the real-life strength and experience to defend themselves against authority. What you need to do is coach them. Let them know you back them. Have the confidence that their parents love them and back them. Send them in to defend themselves. When authority inevitably squashes their defense, you then teach them how to go above that authority. So you teach your child to file lawsuits. You teach your child to go to their supervisor and their supervisor and to fight back until your child wins. And when you do that, you are teaching your child to be strong and independent in a world that you will be squashed if you are not strong and independent. This is how we need to raise our children. In everything we do, we need to think, is by me stepping in, am I making my child stronger, or am I keeping my child the same? And if they're staying the same, eventually they're getting weaker. That is how we raise our children. Strength and independence. Is there any value in going to local school boards if one is homeschooling? You know, David, I appreciate you asking that question. So right now, where am I in my homeschooling experience? I don't claim to be a prophet. I don't claim to be something I'm not. Now, I'm very researched on homeschooling. I have a bachelor's degree in history education, a master's degree in early childhood education. I've done a lot of reading, and I'm a pretty good philosopher. But I've never actually gone to the school board about homeschooling. What I would say is that I have spoken with homeschool parents who have gone to the school, and they've actually made agreements with the school. So I know a guy who either 3 or 4 days a week he homeschools, and 1 or 2 days a week he sends his child to public school. And that's an agreement he made with the local school district. So yeah, I would imagine there is value, especially in finding other homeschoolers in your community so that you could get some strength and going to the school board. And you know what? Just as public school children are quote unquote entitled to certain things, like the school district has to provide books to a homeschool student by law. If you're homeschooling, they have to provide you books. Given I wouldn't want to use their books, but you can. Your homeschool child is entitled to joining the local school sporting teams. Like my child, he'll be on the soccer team, the lacrosse team at the local school. And that'll be good for socialization and getting to know children. He'll get invited to their birthday parties. So it's like, oh, your child won't be socialized. Yes, he will be. But for that reason, I actually did an interview with a homeschool mom 2 days ago. And over the course of the next year, I'm going to be doing interviews with hundreds of homeschooling children that have been homeschooled and parents that homeschool to help us get reference points so we can answer these questions and we have people to lean on. And if you have any questions, I will ask all of these people with hundreds of years of experience combined what their experience has been with that. So I hope that helps answer your question. Most public schools don't want controversy. I'm a teacher and a Christian. Parents do nothing to stand up for their rights. Public schools know children are timid and weak. They definitely capitalize on it. Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's that public schools know, especially Christians, don't stand up for their rights. right? I mean, everybody knows the scenario I just laid out, that if you brought a civil suit against the school would apologize so fast. What the school's going to go to court and say, this Christian child said he wouldn't date a Muslim, so we suspended him. What? Christians can't have in-group mating preferences? Are you saying that Muslims can't have in-group mating preferences? Of course they can. Jewish people can't have in-group mating preferences? Of course they can. That is pure and obvious discrimination. The school would lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in a lawsuit. The school board would so fast say, we apologize, come back to school. And more importantly, your child would learn a great lesson. And of course, if the school wanted to take it to civil suit, your child would have their college paid for. Phenomenal. But parents don't fight back, largely because we all went to public school. We don't know how to fight back. But we as parents have to take it on ourselves to reflect inward. Like when I say, I come from the most loving home on planet Earth, right? I had the best parents ever. But when I say my mother used to go to the school and fight for me, and now I realize that made me weaker, that at times I myself have difficulty dealing with authority. And I overcome that because I self-reflect, and I've been trying more and more to challenge authority. But I self-reflected to realize that something within my own upbringing helped make me weaker. You have to self-reflect as a parent. And now I know that every chance my child has, although they'll know I support them, and if it gets to the point where I have to, I will step in and let the school district or authority know. But I want my child to have the experience himself dealing with authority. That's how you make a child strong, to the point where I want him to know how to file lawsuits. I want him, before I went to the school board, I would have my child write a letter to the school board, right? This is how we raise strong children. Everything we do, strength and independence. Everything we do. And at times, that's hard as a parent. At times, there's certain things. It's even the little things. But at times, it's, I want to comfort them. I want to make sure they're okay. They're upset. And it can seem harsh. But it's not. It's love. You love your child by letting them know you're there, but helping them become strong, become independent. Letting them know you love them, you're not mad at them, and that you have their back, but you love them by making them strong, is what I'm saying. And that's what I do in everything I do as a parent. Like if you watch me throughout the day, the littlest shit, people would say I'm crazy. Like my child, he'll be messing around and he'll get stuck in his little toy car. And my wife will go to jump in. I just stick my arm out. And he's like, And I just calmly say, Brady, slow down. How do you get out? How do you get yourself out? And it's amazing what you see in a child. He'll get comforted by my voice, and he'll start to calm himself. And he'll start to just look. He's 13 months old. And he'll start to look, and he'll get himself out of it. But a parent's instinct is, oh my God, he's stuck. I have to go in. I don't want to go in. I want him strong. And it might seem, he's like, oh my God, that's cruel. Why don't you jump in? It's not cruel. It's not cruel. Every moment is a teachable moment. Everything that happens with your child is a teachable moment. And we have to adjust our mindset as parents to know that we are bringing our children into an unfair world. We are bringing our children into a world that is rigged against us, especially if you are a Christian, especially if you are white, especially my child. Everything you see on the news is white males are bad, right? Affirmative action makes it more difficult for white males to get jobs, to get raises, to get promotions than minorities. The world is rigged against my child. So I have an obligation to make my child as strong and independent as I can. I need to make sure my child knows how to, as I said, physically defend themselves. I need to make sure my child is physically strong, that my child has experience with violence, not at the home. A parent never lays a finger on their child. I cannot stress that enough. Do not spank your child. Every study shows that the hitting of a child, even the lightest spanking, has lifelong psychological impacts that are negative to the child. You can look this up, even to the point that it lowers IQ. Never lay your hand on your child. In fact, I will do episodes in which I talk about I never raise my voice to my child. Never raise your voice to your child. And I'll get into that and why that is. I think from this, you probably have an idea that is well thought out. That doesn't mean there's not punishment. That doesn't mean there's not, well, I shouldn't say punishment, there's not consequences to actions. But the consequences aren't hitting, the consequences aren't yelling. Because with everything you do, just as when I say, and if my mom sees this, she did the best job ever. But just when I say my mom would fight authority for me, you have to think, when you raise your voice to your child, when you hit your child, everything you do, your child is learning from what you do. There's lessons in that. When you let your child struggle to get up, right? Your child's stuck in the toy car and they can't get up and they're crying. If I let them do it themselves, there's a lesson in that. I have a video from my child when he was 12 months old. It's the coolest thing you've ever seen. The smoke alarm starts going off, and he has seen this a few times now. So I got the pillow and I'm waving the smoke alarm. And everything he does, everything from when he's little, like when he started walking, I let him walk. I let him fall. Like he would fall and I would basically just try to catch his head if he, don't let him hit his head. But everything else, he'd walk, fall, walk, fall, walk, fall. And, people would say, yo, you got to be more all over him. I said, no, I don't need to be all over him. I need him to have a mindset that he's an independent person. Because everything we do teaches. Everything. What is the lesson in what we do? So the smoke alarm's going off, and I get my pillow, and I'm waving it, waving it, waving it, waving it. And he runs up behind me. He grabbed the pillow, ran up behind me, and he's doing the smoke alarm. Maybe I'll post this video. It's the coolest thing. But the point is that even at 13 months old, you can see in my child, he's so independent now. Like if I go to help him with something now, he gets annoyed. I got this, Dad. When I give him a fork, like if I try to give him the fork to his mouth, he doesn't want it. He's give me the fork, and he pokes with the fork, and he eats. Because in everything I do, I think, am I making him stronger, or am I doing something for him that he should be learning that he can do himself? And that's how we raise our children. That's how we make them strong. Bonnie Bear, thank you. I really appreciate you tuning in too, guys. Bonnie, I know you tuned into my other videos. I don't know. I've been trying to respond to people's comments, like if they watch them after the live stream. But yeah, it's hard because I'm a really busy person. But I'm going to get back to all your comments and answer. But Bonnie, I saw you would watch my other videos. I appreciate it. You can't make them comfortable all the time. Real life is uncomfortable. They need to learn. Yeah, and that's the truest thing. That real life is uncomfortable. In real life, they will get bullied. In real life, they will get intimidated by people, by authority, by bosses at work, by institutions, by corporations, by the mainstream media, by professors at school, by the academic system, by Hollywood. Our children will be bullied. They will be intimidated. And you need to think in everything you do, how do I make them strong? Guys, if you have any experience homeschooling, if you have been homeschooled yourself, or if you have homeschooled a child, if you had done any alternative schools like trade schools, and you'd be interested in coming on here and talking to me, even if you've gone to put your children in private schools like Christian schools, and you'd like to talk to me about your experience, please email me at ClassicalLearnerToday. I'm going to put the email up here, ClassicalLearnerToday@gmail.com, LearnerToday@gmail.com. Email me your story, and maybe not right away, but over time, I plan on having hundreds of parents, hundreds I want to get done this year, God willing, if I can, that can share their experiences, so when someone like David asks a great question that I don't necessarily know the answer to, is there any value going to local school board meetings if you're homeschooling? I would imagine there's value, but maybe we could get someone on here that has done that. We could say, what is your experience with dealing with the school district in terms of getting your books and getting the same benefits that children at the school get? Have you gone to the principal and discussed this? Have you gone to the school board and discussed this? If I could get people on here, I could start to, right, like when something's new, right? Like when I start out to do something new, it seems like even a little task, I'm like, man, I don't know. This seems like a mountain. I have to learn something new. And sometimes just seeing other people that have done it, talk about it, can empower you to say, oh, okay, I know where to start now. Oh, you know what? I saw an interview on ClassicalLearner/FFRnews. By the way, follow my other pages, please. ClassicalLearnerFFRnews. I saw an interview with a mother. She had gone to the school board. You know what? Let me go back and watch that one again. And, you know, we can, then I'll have some experience. I'll know how to handle it. So please send me your emails, ClassicalLearnerToday, and lend me your ears. And as I'm going to make a skit. I'm going to be like, help me, help you. Send me your stories. Help me, help you. Help me, help you. I have so many skits I want to make in my mind, which I'm going to be posting the skits exclusively on Classical Learner, my other YouTube page. So make sure you follow that, because I'm going to do, trust me, I have some pretty eye-opening acting skits, comedy skits in my mind that over time I'm going to be making. I'm going to be posting children's books, educational children's books, which promote positive messages for children in general, for homeschoolers, for Christian parents, as I myself have been pretty religious these days, and all that stuff. So please follow my Classical Learner on YouTube, Classical Learner on Facebook. Email me your stories, ClassicalLearnerToday@gmail.com, and put your money where your heart is, www.patreon.com/FFRnews. I mean, listen, if you're ever struggling for money at all, don't donate to me. But if you're not, if you could do even $1 a month, it helps me, guys. It helps my spirit more than anything, just knowing people support me. But really appreciate it, and thanks for tuning in. So, as always, power to the individual. Long live liberty. Together, we are going to change the world from the grassroots level. Change starts at home, people.